What's going on, everyone? It's me, Armani. Today I'm going to be installing a cam on the Challenger and kind of showing you guys that process. I didn't make as many videos as I would have liked to have when the car was just bolt on and tuned. The car was fun, made decent power, not enough in my opinion. I mean, it was fun for a while, but kind of grew out of it. So we're going to be going ahead and throwing a cam. The cam we're throwing in is the Texas Speed Stage 3 boost cam. We're doing Mopar Performance valve springs, the TSP Stage 3 cam, locking out the VVT and a thermostat. We're going to be changing out a few other just miscellaneous parts and all the gaskets, everything like that. I'm going to try to keep the video as short as possible with as much information in it as possible. Maybe even 2 parts depending on how long it is. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wash the front clip and saran wrap the entire car, throw some fender blankets on it so we don't scratch anything. And with that being said, let's get started on today's video.
Alright, now that I got this PPF installed on the whole front clip right here, I'm going to go ahead and get the car up on some ramps. We're going to go ahead and drop the radiator and condenser. We're leaving the condenser installed. It's just going to be kind of hanging out the way so we can pull the cam out the front. It's a pretty simple thing to do. I'll show you guys how to pull the radiator once it's done, but to pull the fan shroud, you got to just kind of pull this intake piping off, and you just kind of pick up on it and it pops right out. Alright, so now I'm removing the actual scoop off of it. It's just 4 10mm bolts around it. I'm going to go ahead and expose everything. I have to pull the intake off to pull the shroud out. You got to kind of like lift it up and then pick it up or drop it if you have a lift, but since I'm so close to the floor, it won't just kind of bend out the way because the radiator's in the way, so I'll update you guys once I pull all this apart. Alright, I got a good bit of the stuff pulled off. The radiator and fan is out. We got the coolant drain, the coil packs off, the wiring harnesses are disconnected. There's a few more things we got to disconnect, but I'm going to go ahead and go underneath the car, disconnect the headers from the collector and the O2 sensors, and then start pulling off the intake manifold and pretty much pull out the valve covers and then the heads from there, and I'll show you guys once we pull the intake manifold off. Alright guys, we got the car back on the floor, took out the ramps, went ahead and removed the intake manifold. Super easy, you just pull these bolts out. That one in the back you need a swivel for, or you got to do it by hand. These came out pretty simple. You just have this plug that goes to it, and then this that goes to the front of the intake manifold, and your actual like fuel line that's going to it, and then I think I already mentioned, but this one just goes to the back of it. Once I'm done with this, pretty much, I guess the next thing would be to remove the valve covers. Working on that last bolt in the back, that one is a real pain. This one's basically ready to come off. Alright guys, and I got a quick little tip if you're working on anything. Like, this is the connector that comes off the alternator. It's made of metal. When you're in the job just kind of moving stuff around trying to get stuff, you might not be paying attention, and if that whacks like your strut tower, or if you don't have the car saran wrapped or any fender blankets, you could scratch something. So just tape stuff like that off, and then I like to organize all my bolts with like Ziploc bags, and I label them. So just, organize all your bolts, because you might not be getting to the car like right away. It might, let's say you break something and the part's on back order, or you're waiting for the new part to come in. It may take like a day or two, or maybe even a week or so, and you may remember how to put it back together like the next day or so, but after about a week, man, some bolts just turn into weight reduction, and then it's a pain in the ass to try to find where they go. Alright, so I'm getting ready to remove the harmonic balancer. I got the puller on there already. This is the bolt right here. This thing is on there pretty dang tight. So the way I took this off, because we don't have air in this building or an air impact, so there's the bolt holes for the puller tool, and then there's actually separate holes that have nothing to do with there's no threads or nothing like that. So we just kind of stuck this through one of the holes and basically caught the lip back there. I can't really show you on camera that well, but basically you just catch like the top of the oil pan, or the top of the bottom of the water pump, and it'll basically just keep the motor from spinning, and it locks it so you can break that nut loose. That's just a little trick I use. Maybe it'll help you out. Alright, and that's going to be a wrap for tonight. Basically just got the timing cover off, the alternator, disconnected the AC condenser, or the compressor. Didn't discharge anything, just basically bolted it off and left it off to the side. Both valve covers are ready to come off. I'm just kind of leaving them on so that way nothing gets into the motor. You don't want dust or any debris or anything like that getting onto the motor. I'm going to go ahead and throw the timing cover back on. All right, guys, we're starting on day 2 here. We already got the timing cover removed. I'm going to go ahead and change my water pump. I was planning on doing it anyways. Once you're this deep, it's always a good idea to just kind of change it out. And I'll show you why it's a good idea to just change parts when you're this deep in. So this is my old water pump right here. You can hear the bearing is pretty loud, and then if you shake it up and down, it makes a noise. I don't know how well the camera picks it up, but this was definitely going to go out in probably another few thousand miles. So it's always a good idea to just replace it with new parts while you're this deep already. I am going to be putting a 180 degree thermostat as opposed to the stock 200 degree one. We're going to go ahead and pull the heads off, and I'll show you guys how to remove the cam once we're there. So I got this first rocker arm assembly removed on the top, and a little trick I like to do is just put a Sharpie on the top of the retainers right here, and that just lets you know how the retainer was sitting before. If it flips 180 degrees, it creates a slight impression when you do torque them down, and you know, it may or may not come loose over time if you had it flipped 180 degrees. That's just a slight precaution I take. Another thing is, when you're breaking these loose, one thing I like to do is, just like you'd like to break this loose and then come to the outside and then work your way like that, so that way it doesn't create a slight imprint on the actual head itself or the tube. And you know, that's not like it's gonna happen or it's not gonna happen. It's just a slight precaution I like to take, and a good habit to get into. And then the next thing, you can either put the bolts on a piece of cardboard, like draw out a little template and then just poke the holes and then put the bolt through. But I just left all the bolts intact on the rocker arm assembly and then wrapped it in saran wrap. That way, you know, there's no dust sitting on it or anything like that. Instead of cleaning it all up before you put it back in, you know, it stays pre-oiled, and then you just drop it in and there's no dust on it or anything like that. So I got both rocker arm assemblies removed. If you are going to be using the same push rods, make sure you keep them in order. It kind of just helps with the wear process. It's always good to put them back where they came out of. Next thing, removing the head. I like to remove all the head bolts in the torque sequence. So basically, you're just reversing the torque sequence. Instead of torquing it down, you're just removing all the bolts. But you don't want to just back one bolt out all the way. You want to actually just crack them all loose before you start pulling the bolts out. So once I pull this head off, I'll show you guys what to do next. And so I got both the heads pulled off. I do have long tube headers, so it's pretty difficult to get them out. They're really heavy, but if you have shorty headers or just the stock manifold, it should be pretty easy to pull out. If you do have long tube headers on the driver's side, you do have to pull out the O2 sensor. It does come in contact with the steering bar. And after I got both of the heads pulled off, now next thing I'm going to do is pull the lifters out, which is just a 10mm bolt in the center, and the tray pops out with it. Once I pull the lifters out, I'm going to go ahead and set the engine at top dead center. I'm going to pull the cam gear off. I'm going to be locking the VVT. But before I pull the cam gear off, I got to pull the tensioner. Once we pull the cam gear, the cam's going to come out. I'll throw the new cam in, put the lifters in, and then put the gear back on. But till then, I'll keep you guys updated. So we're now pulling the cam out. We have the lifters out. It was just those 4 8mm bolts that hold in each tray. Now we have this bolt loose on the cam gear itself. We stuck an Allen inside of the timing chain tensioner. That way there's no more tension on the chain itself. It's got slack. So we went ahead and put some marks everywhere. We got the engine on top dead center, which is just that line right there on the gear, lining up with this top. And we put a few marks on the actual chain itself, just so that way we don't skip a tooth on the bottom sprocket. And then so now that we have that pinned, we're going to go ahead and pull the tensioner off. We're going to pull the gear out and then lock the VVT, put the new cam in, and go from there. Okay guys, so we're going to go ahead and pull the stock cam out right now. We have the bolt threaded in there just so that way it gives you a little more leverage on the cam itself. You don't want to thread it in too much, because the more you go in, the less leverage you'll have. Next thing is, if you have the condenser tied up like we did, you want to make sure you drop it down before you go ahead and try to pull this cam out. The last thing is, you just want to make sure you're giving this a lot of push down on the end here, because that cam is heavy and it's going to be trying to teeter-totter its way down in the back, so you got to be mindful of that. With that being said, let's go ahead and pull this guy out. Yeah, it's really heavy. It's not as easy as it looks. You want to just take your time, make sure you're not marring up the walls on the inside. You got to just kind of find the hole until you get to the next one, and you just kind of repeat that process. And the more you pull it out, the easier this gets, because the more weight you then have on the back. And we're hitting the support right there, and we're out. And just like that, you have successfully given birth to a male. So we're going to go ahead and throw some assembly lube on the new cam and go ahead and install that. And reassembly starts from there, guys. Okay, so we're putting some assembly lube on the cam itself now. You can use regular engine oil if you're going to be starting the car, pretty soon. But this car's probably not going to see the dyno until about next week or so. So we're going to go ahead and throw some assembly lube on there. That way it keeps it nice and protected. For the initial startup, we don't have any marring. And you don't have to do the whole cam at once. You can just do like a section of it. And then once you get to that point, but we're going to go ahead and just kind of do the whole cam before it goes in. And you don't want to be shy with this stuff. I mean, you want it everywhere. It's just oil at the end of the day. It's not hurting nothing. So we're doing it everywhere, and it'll be fine. It'll be all good. And then once you got a nice thick coating over the whole cam, you want to make sure you get it everywhere. We're going to go ahead and throw this cam in. So you want to make sure you're nice and comfortable. We're going to get a good bit of the cam in before we stick the bolt in, just so that way we have a little more space. And you want to be super careful again when installing this. And this is about where the bolt is going to come in handy. Let me grab that. And this is again just helping give some leverage to slide it in there. And you don't want to force anything. You want to be very careful that it should just slide right in. If you have to force something, something is not right. Just like that, it kind of got on a bind. We're going to pull it back out a little bit. Unthread this bolt, give us a little bit more leverage, and just like that, it's in. So now we're going to pull the VVT or the cam gear out and lock out the VVT and start reassembly on the whole thing. Okay guys, so we're going to go ahead and lock out the VVT. I already broke it apart just to kind of make it a little bit quicker. It's not too complex on what you do. So you have this one right here. This is the circular hole. It's kind of like this one, but you'll see like this bolt coming through. It's got a pin on the end. You just go ahead and slip this lock tool on there. Take a little bit of pressure off of the spring from the bolt. And this one right here, you're not taking that one out. You're only breaking it loose. If you take it out, it will unwind the spring, and this is trash. You need a new one. And don't remove this tool until you put all the bolts back in, otherwise it may unwind the spring and then that'll be trash again. So once you flip it over, this is the bolt you only break loose. Everything else comes on out. So once you've broken it loose, I like to put the bolt on the bottom and have the tool to the left of me. And we take the actual lockout itself, and you install it in this one right here. You know you install it in this one because the corner to it, next to it, will be contacting, unlike all the others. All the others do not make contact with the wall, so this one right here. We'll install this with the slip facing the center. We just dropped that in. I put a little bit of Loctite on that already. And then we're just going to go ahead and torque this thing down until we can't pull it back out. And just like that, we're going to give it one more test. Yeah, we can't pull that out. So now that we can't pull that out, we're going to go ahead and line this all back up. And go ahead and drop all the rest of the bolts in. And this one with the rod on it right here goes in this hole right here where the tool is. If you don't put this back in the correct hole, it will unwind the spring and it's toast. So we're going to go ahead and throw some Loctite on these, torque it down to 15 pounds, and it's basically just the reverse of how you took it apart. And I'll show you guys once we're going ahead and installing it on the car. And y'all saw us lock out the VVT, so the VVT is locked out. Going ahead and installing it. The cam bolt torque spec is 90 foot-pounds, and I mean, unless you're the Hulk, there's no way you're grabbing this and keeping that from spinning and torquing it down. So we have it torqued down to 90 foot-pounds right now. A little trick we just came up with. It took us like 2 minutes to get these parts together. Just a piece of like an iron rod with some holes in it. We have a socket down in there with 4 layers of cardboard between the piston and the socket. One of the old head bolts stacked up on 2 sockets, and basically just tightened it down. And I mean, it may be ghetto, you may laugh, but this worked. If you guys want to give it a shot, I mean, there might be a tool for it, but we just had all this stuff sitting around in the garage, and I mean, it worked just fine. No damage to anything, and got the bolt tightened in. All right, guys, so we're going ahead and torquing the heads down. We did the first initial 25 foot-pounds on the bigger bolts, and then 15 on the smaller bolts. Now we're going through and doing 50. You just want to work your way from the center out. And you want to try to be as precise as possible, as close to 50 as you can get. You don't want to go over too much. That's 50.2. Now we jump to the bottom one. Alright, so we got the head torque down. We got the main bolts torqued down to 50 right now, so the torque sequence would be 25 and then 50 foot-pounds. On the 25 foot-pounds, you don't have to double check to make sure if you're on point. On the 50, definitely double check, make sure you're on point, because the edges will pull it down and then the centers will get loose. These are still torqued to 15 foot-pounds. I haven't torqued them to 25 yet. We're going to go ahead and do a quarter turn on all of the bolts in the same sequence, which would be 90 degrees. And once I'm done with that, I'll show you guys torquing the second one, but I'll give you guys just one quick little. So we're starting here, and we're just gonna, I forgot to turn the torque wrench off. And we're just gonna go to 90 degrees, which would be right there, and you're just gonna repeat that on all the bolts. All right, so we got the torque wrench set to 25. We just went ahead and did 90 degrees on all of them, and obviously you don't double check the 90 degrees because you would basically, you know, do it twice. So we're gonna go ahead and torque these down to 25 foot-pounds, starting at the center, working the way out. And again, you want to stop right at 25 foot-pounds as close as you can. Now we're throwing the timing cover on. We got the new gasket pressed in place. With these gaskets, make sure you just go in the curves first. That way you don't stretch the gasket out and you have a little bit of extra hanging. We're going to go ahead and throw some ultra black right here on the corners, on the oil pan itself, because this bottom part right here is sealed by the actual oil pan gasket. We cleaned everything. You want to make sure nothing has any oil on it, just to kind of help keep it as sealed as possible. And we're just going to throw some of that ultra black just right here in the corner. And once we get this bolted back on, I'll show you guys what we're doing next. We got both rocker arm assemblies installed with the push rods. We pre-oiled everything. Everything is nice and lubed up. The driver's side is already done. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys basically the torque sequence on this. So once you've torqued it all, not torqued it down, but kind of snugged it and it's making contact, you're just going to kind of tighten it with this starting off heat in the middle, going 1 over and then back 1 over And then basically the same process you follow to tighten the 10 millimeters on the head bolt. And we are torquing these to 16 foot-pounds. So you only do one side at a time. So we're going to do the intake. Just finished up on the valve covers. On the passenger side, make sure you take your time so that way you don't knock the gasket out on the corner. Other than that, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Got the coils in on this side. Going to finish throwing them in on this side. After this, going to just throw the intake manifold on, then the new idler pulleys and tensioner, and the radiator is going to go on, and hopefully it should start. This thing wrapped up. We got the intake manifold on, valve covers, coil packs, everything is in. We got the belt reran, all my new pulleys. We got the 180-degree thermostat. Next thing is going to be to redo the condenser and radiator. I'm going to go ahead and jack the car up, and basically it's just the same thing as how you pulled it off. We got the alternator and condenser installed. Everything else is in. We're going to go ahead and throw some oil in it. I already drained it. I don't remember if I mentioned it earlier in the video, but you want to leave the oil in the car before you actually start removing everything. That way the coolant can separate and set itself to the bottom. That way when you drain it, the coolant is already at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and fill this up, and then I'll film the first start, and let's see if it starts. We got the first start. We got a little bit of smoke and stuff. That's probably just some coolant burning off. We're gonna go ahead and just kind of let this warm up, monitor for any leaks or anything like that. And we're just kind of gonna wait till it warms up. Once it warms up, I'll show you guys some chop.
If you guys have stuck around till this point in the video, I really appreciate you guys. If you guys are interested to see what this car is going to make on the dyno, make sure you subscribe, like, and hit that bell notification. That way you get notified whenever I post. I'm going to be trying to post more content with this car. The next few videos should be about this car, about what it made on the dyno, and just some street driving and stuff like that. Once the season opens back up, I do plan on taking it to the track and see what it'll run. We are going to be doing some dragging times in the meantime, such as like 60 to 130, 8th mile, quarter mile, stuff like that. But as far as that goes, I hope you guys enjoyed. That's going to wrap this video up. And again, make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe, and check me out on all social media, just Armani_RT.